The galaxy had many powerful civilizations, but none were feared more than the dominion of Deathworlders. Their empire stretched across hundreds of star systems, and their fleets were known for crushing entire civilizations without mercy. Many species in the galaxy believed resistance against the Dominion was impossible. When the Dominion arrived, war always followed, and war always ended the same way: complete domination. Among the many species living in the galaxy, there was one that confused everyone: humans. Humans were strange compared to other civilizations. They rarely spoke in the Galactic Council meetings. They did not show their military strength. They traded peacefully with nearby systems and mostly stayed inside their own territory. Many alien leaders believed humanity was weak. Some believed humans were too peaceful to survive in a galaxy full of powerful warriors. Others believed humans were simply afraid, but the truth was much more complicated. Far away on the edge of human-controlled space, a deep space listening station floated silently between two dark asteroids. The station was small and looked harmless, but inside it, dozens of human officers carefully watched the surrounding star systems. The station was part of a massive early warning network built by humanity. Every movement near human territory was recorded, analyzed, and reported back to Earth. Inside the station, Commander Elias Carter stood quietly near a large holographic display showing nearby star systems. Blue lines marked trade routes and green lights showed human colonies. For several months, the region had been peaceful, too peaceful. Carter had served in the human fleet for many years, and he knew that peace in the galaxy rarely lasted long. One of the young officers suddenly spoke with concern. "Commander, we are detecting something entering the outer border." Carter turned toward the display. The blue holographic map changed quickly. A new signal appeared far away near the edge of the system. At first, it was only a small flashing point, then more signals appeared behind it. The officer zoomed the display closer. The room became quiet. The signals were not trade ships. They were warships, heavy warships. Long metallic shapes appeared on the screen, each one surrounded by powerful energy readings. The symbols on the display confirmed what everyone in the room already suspected: Dominion fleet. At least 40 warships had entered human territory. Another officer quickly began scanning their weapon systems and shield power. "Commander, these ships are fully armed." Carter nodded slowly. He had expected this moment for a long time. "Send the report to Earth Command," he said calmly. The officer hesitated for a moment. "Should we send a warning message to the Dominion fleet?" Carter looked at the display again. The alien ships were moving deeper into human territory without hesitation. "No," he said quietly. "Do not contact them." The officers exchanged confused looks, but they trusted their commander. The Dominion fleet continued moving through the system like a pack of predators searching for prey. Several small mining stations existed in this region. Most of them were automated, but a few human workers still lived on them. The alien ships passed near the first station. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then a bright flash of energy appeared. One Dominion warship fired a plasma cannon. The mining station exploded into pieces. Back inside the listening station, the human officers watched silently. Some of the younger officers felt anger rising inside them. "Commander, they destroyed the station," one of them said. Carter kept his eyes on the display. "Record everything," he replied calmly. Another message arrived from the monitoring sensors. More Dominion ships were entering the system. The number quickly increased from 40 to nearly 60 warships. The officer controlling the scanners spoke again. "Commander, they are moving directly toward the inner colonies." The room became tense. Everyone knew what the Dominion usually did when they entered a new territory: conquest, slavery, destruction. But Carter still did not give the order to attack. Instead, he pressed a small button on his control panel. A secure channel opened directly to Earth. The holographic image of Earth Command appeared in the center of the room. Several high-ranking officers stood inside a large command center thousands of kilometers below the surface of Earth. Admiral Sophia Reyes looked directly at Carter. "Commander, report." Carter spoke clearly. "Dominion fleet has entered human territory, 60 confirmed warships. They have destroyed one mining station and are moving deeper into the system." The Admiral remained silent for a moment. Around her, dozens of other officers studied the incoming data. One of them asked the question that everyone was thinking: "Have they attempted communication?" Carter shook his head. "Negative." The Admiral slowly nodded. "Very well. Continue observation. No engagement." The connection closed. Inside the listening station, some officers looked surprised. "Commander," one of them asked carefully, "are we really going to let them continue?" Carter folded his arms and looked again at the growing number of Dominion ships. They think we are weak, he said quietly. They think our silence means fear. Outside the station, the alien fleet moved confidently through human space. Their ships were massive and heavily armed. Their commanders believed this mission would be easy. To them, humanity was just another small civilization waiting to be conquered. But deep beneath the surface of Earth, something else was happening. Hidden shipyards began activating massive warships, started powering their engines. Factories began producing weapons at full capacity. Secret fleets that had been waiting for years slowly began. Moving humanity had remained silent for a very long time. But that silence had never meant weakness. It had meant preparation. And now, the moment humanity had been waiting for was finally arriving far away inside the Dominion flagship. The alien commander looked at the holographic map of human territory. He laughed loudly. "These humans are cowards," he said. "They will surrender before we even reach their homeworld." None of the Dominion officers realized that millions of kilometers away, thousands of human warships were already beginning to move. And soon the galaxy would learn the most dangerous lesson of all humanity was quiet. But humanity was never weak, and their silence was about to end. The Dominion fleet continued its slow advance deeper into human territory. Their ships moved with confidence like hunters entering the land of weak prey. Inside the massive Dominion flagship, the alien commander Varkan stood in front of a wide star map. He was a tall, armored creature with dark scales and glowing yellow eyes. His species had conquered many worlds, and he believed this mission would be no different. Around him, several Dominion officers watched the holographic display showing nearby human colonies. One officer spoke with amusement. "Commander, the humans still have not responded." Varkan gave a deep laugh. "Of course they have not responded," he said. "They know resistance is useless." Another officer pointed toward a small group of signals on the map. "Several human cargo ships are leaving the system." Varkan looked pleased. "They are running," he said. The officers in the room began laughing. For them, this war had already been decided. But what they did not know was that every movement of their fleet was being recorded. Thousands of sensors hidden across human space were watching them. Back at the deep space listening station, Commander Carter and his officers continued monitoring the situation. The holographic map now showed 62 Dominion warships moving slowly toward the inner systems. One officer spoke with anger. "Commander, they destroyed another station." The display showed the signal of a second mining outpost disappearing. Carter remained calm. "Send the data to Earth Command," he said. The officer nodded and quickly transmitted the information. For a moment, the room was quiet, except for the soft sounds of machines analyzing incoming signals. Then a new alert appeared on the display. Multiple signals emerging from deep space. The young officer looked surprised. "Commander, we are detecting several unknown signals." Carter walked closer to the screen. The signals were faint and hidden behind asteroid fields, but they were clearly moving toward the system. The officer increased the scan resolution. Dozens of new signals appeared, then hundreds. The room suddenly became silent. They were human warships, large, powerful ships moving quietly through the darkness. Carter allowed himself a small smile. Earth had begun moving the fleets. But none of those ships were moving directly toward the Dominion fleet. Yet they were spreading across nearby systems, forming a massive network of hidden positions. Human strategy was simple but effective. Observe, prepare, strike, only when the enemy believed victory was certain. Back on Earth, inside the underground command center, Admiral Sophia Reyes stood in front of a large circular table where dozens of holographic maps floated in the air. Around her were the highest commanders of the human fleet. Fleet movements appeared across the displays. Hundreds of ships leaving hidden bases, carriers launching fighter wings, heavy battleships activating long-range rail cannons. One officer spoke. "Dominion fleet continues advancing. They believe we are retreating." Another officer added, "Our evacuation ships have removed most civilians from the outer colonies." Admiral Reyes nodded slowly. "Good." Another commander looked at the map showing the Dominion fleet. "Their formation is aggressive but careless," he said. "They believe they are hunting." Reyes looked at the growing number of human fleet signals surrounding nearby systems. Then she spoke calmly. "Let them believe that far away in Dominion space, more alien fleets were preparing to join the invasion. They had heard that human territory was poorly defended. Many commanders wanted to take part in the conquest. Meanwhile, the main Dominion fleet continued moving through the system, destroying small stations and satellites along the way. Inside the flagship, Commander Varkan watched the explosions on the display with satisfaction. "Still no response from the humans," he said. One officer stepped forward. "Commander, we have detected something unusual." Varkan turned his head. "Explain." The officer activated a sensor display. Several signals appeared at the edge of the system. Unknown ships. Varkin studied the data. Are they human warships? The officer shook his head slowly. The signals disappeared before we could identify them. Varkin narrowed his eyes. Perhaps the humans finally decided to send scouts. He said his officers did not look concerned. Even if they were scouts, the Dominion fleet would destroy them easily. The fleet continued advancing toward the inner colonies. But the small signals that had appeared earlier were not scouts. They were advanced stealth drones launched by human fleets already waiting nearby. Every drone was transmitting information back to Earth. Human commanders were now studying the Dominion fleet with perfect accuracy. They knew every ship, every weapon, every weakness. Hours passed as the Dominion ships approached the next human colony world. This time the colony was not empty. Millions of humans still lived there. The Dominion commander prepared to broadcast a message. He wanted the colony to surrender before the attack began. The communication signal spread across the planet. Citizens of the human colony, Varkin announced, "Your territory now belongs to the Dominion. Surrender immediately and you may survive. If you resist, your world will burn." For several seconds there was silence. Then a human message appeared on the flagship screen. Only 2 words. Message received. Varkin laughed again. Finally, they speak. He said, "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "We will show them the cost of resistance." But before the Dominion ships could fire their weapons, another signal suddenly appeared across every display in the fleet. It was not from the colony. It came from far deeper inside human space. The message was simple. "This is Earth Command. You have violated human territory and destroyed civilian stations. You were warned. Now you will face the consequences." For a moment the Dominion bridge became silent. Then Varkin laughed louder than before. "Consequences," he repeated. From them he turned toward his officers, prepared to destroy the colony. But as the Dominion ships powered their weapons, new signals suddenly appeared across the entire system. At first there were only a few, then dozens, then hundreds. Human warships were emerging from the darkness around the system. Battleships, cruisers, carriers, and destroyers. Thousands of weapons slowly turning toward the Dominion fleet. For the first time since entering human space, the Dominion commanders stopped laughing, because the silent species had finally responded, and this response looked like war. For a long moment, the bridge of the Dominion flagship was silent. The alien officers stared at the holographic display as new signals continued appearing across the system. Human ships, more and more of them. The empty darkness around the Dominion fleet was suddenly filled with moving lights. Commander Varkin slowly stepped closer to the display. His yellow eyes narrowed. "How many ships?" he asked. One of the Dominion officers quickly began scanning the signals. His voice sounded less confident than before. 200 confirmed warships, he said. Then he paused. More signals appearing. The number continued rising. 300, 400, 500. The Dominion officers looked at each other. This was not the small defense force they expected. This was a fleet, and it was still growing. Varkin finally spoke again. "Hold formation," he ordered. "They are trying to scare us." The Dominion fleet quickly adjusted its position. Heavy warships moved to the front. Carrier vessels released waves of attack fighters. Missile platforms began powering their launch systems. For years, the Dominion had been the most feared military force in the galaxy. No species had ever surrounded them like this, but they still believed victory was certain. Back on the human colony world below, millions of people watched the sky. From the ground, the battle fleets looked like moving stars, small lights slowly filling the darkness above the planet. At first, many colonists felt fear, but then they saw something strange. Most of the ships appearing in orbit were human ships, huge vessels with the blue symbol of Earth shining across their hulls. Battleships longer than entire cities, carriers releasing small fighter craft, massive rail cannon platforms slowly rotating toward the Dominion fleet. The people on the planet realized something important. Humanity had not abandoned them. The fleet had been waiting. High above the planet, inside the command ship, Aegis Prime Admiral Daniel Hayes watched the Dominion formation carefully. He was an older man with gray hair and calm eyes. Hayes had spent most of his life studying alien warfare. Now the moment he had prepared for was finally here. Around him, dozens of human officers worked quietly at their stations. Fleet formations continued appearing across the holographic map. Admiral, one officer reported 7th Fleet has entered the system. Hayes nodded. "Position them along the outer ring." Another officer spoke. "Dominion ships are powering weapons. They are preparing for battle." Hayes folded his arms and studied the alien formation. The Dominion ships were powerful, but their formation was aggressive and predictable. They believed strength alone could win every war. Humans believed something different. Strategy wins wars. Hayes pressed to communication control. All fleet commanders report. Several holographic windows appeared showing human admirals from other ships across the system. Everything ready, one of them said. Fighter wings armed, another reported rail cannon platforms, fully charged. Hayes looked across the displays. Good, he said. But no one fires until my order. The officers nodded. Human fleets had a strict rule. Never rush into battle. Make the enemy make the first mistake. Meanwhile, inside the Dominion flagship, Varkan continued studying the human ships appearing around them. The alien commander was no longer laughing. He could see hundreds of human vessels now, but something still confused him. Why had they waited? Why allow the Dominion fleet to travel so far before revealing their strength? One of the Dominion officers spoke carefully. Commander, we are now surrounded on multiple sides. Varkan growled quietly. Then we break through them. He turned toward the weapons officer. Prepare plasma batteries. Target the largest human ship. Destroy their command vessel. The officer nodded. Energy weapons across the Dominion fleet began glowing with growing power. Massive plasma cannons warmed up. Missile tubes opened. Attack fighters moved into combat formation. Across the system, human sensors detected every movement. Inside the Aegis Prime, Admiral Hayes watched the data appear on the display. They are charging weapons, an officer reported. Hayes nodded slowly. As expected, the Dominion had always believed fear and destruction were the fastest path to victory. They would attack first, which meant humanity could respond with full authority. Hayes opened a system-wide communication channel. This is Admiral Hayes of the United Earth Fleet. He said calmly, Dominion forces, you are now surrounded inside protected human space. Power down your weapons and prepare to leave immediately. This is your final warning. The message echoed across every Dominion ship. Inside the flagship, Varkan listened to the human message. Then he laughed again, though the sound was colder than before. Surrounded, he repeated. He looked at the officers around him. We are Dominion. No species surrounds us. He slammed one clawed hand on the command console. Fire across the Dominion fleet. Hundreds of plasma cannons fired at once. Bright streams of burning energy shot through space toward the human fleet. The battle had begun. Inside the Aegis Prime, the human officers watched the incoming attacks impact in 5 seconds. One officer reported. Hayes remained calm. Activate defensive screens, he ordered. Around the human fleet, powerful shield fields ignited like glowing walls of light. The Dominion plasma blasts slammed into the shields, sending waves of energy across space. Several human ships shook slightly, but the shields held strong. Damage reports appeared across the display. Minor shield loss, no ship destroyed. The Dominion had expected the first strike to cripple the human fleet. Instead, the attack barely slowed them. Hayes looked toward the tactical officer. Their turn is finished, he said. Now it is ours. The officer nodded. Rail cannon batteries ready. Missile platforms locked. Fighter wings awaiting launch. Hayes took one final look at the enemy fleet filling the center of the system. The Dominion had believed human silence meant weakness. They had believed Earth was afraid of war, but now the galaxy was about to learn the truth. Humanity had not been silent because they were weak. Humanity had been silent because they were preparing. Hayes gave the command. All fleets open fire across the darkness of space. Thousands of human weapons ignited at once, and the first real storm of war began. The moment Admiral Hayes gave the order, the entire human fleet moved like a single living machine. Across the darkness of space, hundreds of battleships fired their massive rail cannons. Long streams of glowing metal projectiles shot through space, faster than sound, faster than fear. At the same time, missile platforms released thousands of guided warheads that spread across the battlefield like a deadly storm. Fighter carriers launched waves of small attack ships that rushed forward like sharp blades cutting through the void. The silence of space disappeared. War had truly begun. Inside the Dominion flagship, Commander Varkan felt the bridge shake as the first human rail cannon strikes slammed into the outer ships of his fleet. One Dominion cruiser was hit directly. The massive metal projectile punched through its shields like they did not exist. The ship exploded into burning fragments. Another rail strike tore through a carrier vessel, destroying it instantly. Several Dominion officers stared in shock. Commander, their weapons are stronger than expected, one officer said nervously. Varkan slammed his clawed hand against the console. Return fire, he roared. The Dominion fleet answered with another wave of plasma cannons and missile attacks. Bright streams of burning energy shot across space again. Some human ships were struck and their shields flashed with powerful energy waves. One human destroyer lost power and began drifting slowly, but the human formation remained strong. The difference between the two fleets was becoming clear. The Dominion fought with raw power. Humans fought with coordination. Across the battlefield, human ships moved in carefully planned patterns. Cruisers rotated positions with battleships. Damaged vessels pulled back, while fresh ships moved forward. Every movement had been practiced for years. Inside the command ship Aegis, Prime Admiral Hayes watched the battle unfold across the massive holographic map. The Dominion fleet was beginning to break formation. Their aggressive attack had pushed them too far forward, exactly as human strategists had predicted. One officer spoke quickly. "Admiral, enemy fighters approaching our left flank." Hayes nodded. "Launch interceptor wings." Within seconds, dozens of human fighters burst out from nearby carriers. They accelerated toward the incoming Dominion fighters like lightning. The two swarms of small ships collided in the darkness of space. Laser fire and missile trails filled the sky around them. Several Dominion fighters exploded almost instantly. Human pilots moved quickly using advanced targeting systems and coordinated attack patterns. The Dominion pilots were strong, but they were not used to fighting an enemy that planned every movement so carefully. Within minutes, the Dominion fighter group began losing control of the battle. Back inside the Dominion flagship, Varkin watched the growing disaster with rising anger. More ships were being destroyed every minute. The human fleet was larger than he expected, and their weapons were more advanced than Dominion intelligence had predicted. Another officer stepped forward. "Commander, enemy ships are surrounding our rear formation," Varkin growled. "Then we push forward, break their center." He turned toward the navigation officer. "Increase engine power, full advance." The Dominion fleet suddenly surged forward toward the center of the human formation. Large battleships fired continuous waves of plasma, while heavy cruisers launched missile barrages. Several human ships were forced to maneuver away from the attack. On the human command ship, Hayes saw the movement instantly. The Dominion commander was trying to punch through the center of the human fleet. It was a desperate move, but it was also exactly what the human strategy had predicted. Hayes turned to the tactical officer, "Stage 2. He said calmly. The officer nodded and activated a command signal. Across the battlefield, several groups of human ships suddenly changed direction. Hidden behind asteroid clusters and debris fields, new human vessels emerged. More battleships, more cruisers, entire reserve fleets that had been waiting quietly in the shadows. The Dominion ships pushing forward suddenly found themselves facing another wall of human warships. For the first time, the Dominion fleet was completely surrounded. Inside the flagship, Varkin stared at the display in disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered. More human ships continued appearing across the system. The humans had not sent one fleet. They had sent several, each group positioned perfectly to trap the Dominion forces. One Dominion officer spoke with fear in his voice. "Commander, we are being encircled." Varkin clenched his claws tightly. He had never experienced a battlefield like this. The Dominion had always been the hunters. Now they were the ones being hunted. Back on the human side, Admiral Hayes watched the final pieces of the trap closing around the Dominion fleet. Rail cannon platforms had moved into long-range positions. Missile ships surrounded the battlefield. Fighter wings controlled the empty space between fleets. Every escape route was slowly disappearing. Hayes opened a communication channel across the fleet. "All units maintain formation," he said. "Do not rush. We end this battle carefully." Around him, human officers continued analyzing enemy movements. Dominion ships were now firing wildly, trying to break through the surrounding fleets, but every attempt was blocked by new waves of human attacks. Rail cannon strikes continued tearing through alien warships. Missile storms exploded across the battlefield. Fighter squadrons hunted down fleeing Dominion ships one by one. The Dominion commander Varkin realized something terrible. This was not a battle. This was a trap. Humanity had allowed the Dominion fleet to enter deep into their territory. They had watched every movement, studied every weakness, then surrounded them with overwhelming force. For the first time in many years, the Dominion fleet faced something they had never experienced before: defeat. But the battle was far from over. The Dominion still had many ships remaining, and Varkin was not ready to surrender. He turned toward his officers with burning anger in his eyes. "Prepare the annihilation weapons," he ordered. "If we fall, We will take this entire system with us. The officer stared at him in shock, because everyone on the bridge knew what those weapons could do, and if they were used, millions of lives on the human colony below would disappear in a single moment. The battle was about to become far more dangerous, and humanity would have to act quickly before the Dominion commander made his final move. The battle above the human colony was growing more violent with every passing minute. Burning fragments of destroyed ships drifted slowly through the battlefield. Explosions flashed like distant stars across the darkness of space. Human fleets continued their careful assault, while the Dominion ships fought desperately to escape the tightening trap. But inside the Dominion flagship, something far more dangerous was happening. Commander Varkin stood in front of the central control platform, while several officers worked nervously around him. The air on the bridge had become tense. Everyone knew what order their commander had just given. Prepare the annihilation weapons. One of the Dominion officers finally spoke carefully. Commander, those weapons will destroy everything in this system. Varkin slowly turned toward him. His yellow eyes glowed with cold determination. If we cannot win, then the humans will not win either, he said. Another officer looked toward the display showing the human colony world below. Millions of life signs appeared across the planet. Commander, the colony is still populated, he said. Varkin showed no emotion. Then their destruction will be a lesson to the rest of the galaxy. The officer hesitated but finally nodded. Deep inside the Dominion flagship, several hidden weapon chambers began activating large containment cores, powered up with dangerous levels of energy. These were not normal weapons. They were Starbreaker devices, experimental weapons, capable of destroying entire planets. If the Dominion fleet could not escape the battle, then they would take the human colony with them. Far away, inside the command ship, Aegis Prime, Admiral Hayes continued studying the battlefield. Human ships had already destroyed nearly 1/3 of the Dominion fleet. Several alien warships were drifting powerless while others were trying to retreat. But something suddenly caught the attention of the tactical officer. Admiral, we are detecting unusual energy activity inside the Dominion flagship. Hayes looked up immediately. Display the signal. The holographic map zoomed closer to the Dominion command vessel. A deep red energy reading appeared near its core. The officer began scanning the signal. His expression quickly became serious. Admiral, that energy pattern matches a Starbreaker device. The room fell silent. Every officer on the bridge understood what that meant. If the Dominion commander activated that weapon, the entire colony world below would be destroyed. Millions of civilians would die instantly. Hayes folded his arms as he thought quickly. How long until activation, he asked. The officer checked the scan data. Estimated 15 minutes. Hayes looked again at the battlefield. The Dominion fleet still had dozens of ships protecting the flagship. Destroying it would not be easy, but there was no other option. Another officer spoke urgently. Admiral, if the Starbreaker detonates, the shockwave could damage our own fleets as well. Hayes nodded slowly. Then we stop it before it fires. He opened a fleet-wide communication channel. All units, priority alert. Dominion flagship preparing Starbreaker weapon. Immediate interception required. Across the battlefield, human commanders quickly received the order. Battleships began adjusting their targeting systems. Fighter wings changed direction toward the enemy flagship. Special operations ships moved forward with incredible speed. Inside the Dominion flagship, the weapon chambers continued charging. Massive power conduits glowed with rising energy. One Dominion engineer spoke nervously. Commander, Starbreaker charge at 40%. Varkin watched the display with satisfaction. The humans had surrounded him, but now they would learn the cost of their victory. Outside the flagship, human rail cannon strikes continued hammering the Dominion fleet. 2 more alien cruisers were destroyed. Several Dominion ships attempted to move closer to protect the flagship, but human ships quickly blocked their path. Back inside Aegis Prime, the tactical officer spoke again. Admiral, enemy ships forming defensive ring around the flagship. Hayes looked toward the fighter command officer. Launch the Spectre wing, he ordered. The officer nodded immediately. From a nearby carrier vessel, a small group of black stealth fighters launched silently. Unlike normal fighters, these ships were designed for infiltration missions. They carried powerful torpedoes capable of penetrating heavy shields. The Spectre wing accelerated rapidly toward the Dominion flagship. Their stealth systems made them nearly invisible to enemy sensors. Inside the Dominion command ship, Varkin continued watching the battle unfold. Human attacks were becoming more aggressive. They were clearly trying to reach his ship. He turned toward the weapons officer. Increase defensive shields. Protect the flagship at all costs. Several Dominion ships quickly moved closer, forming a protective wall around their commander. But human fleets continued closing the distance. On the holographic display, the Spectre fighters moved quietly through the chaos of battle. They slipped between drifting debris and destroyed ships, avoiding enemy radar, slowly approaching the Dominion flagship. Inside, the lead Spectre fighter pilot, Lieutenant Mara Chen, focused on the targeting screen. Her voice was calm but determined. "Target confirmed," she said. "Starbreaker energy core located." The other fighters in the squadron responded, weapons armed, distance closing. Back on Aegis, Prime Admiral Hayes watched their progress carefully. If the Spectre wing failed, the only remaining option would be a massive fleet attack, which could risk detonating the weapon prematurely. Minutes passed slowly. Inside the Dominion flagship, the weapon charge reached 60%. Engineers reported rising power levels across the ship. Commander's Starbreaker charge now at 70%. Varkin smiled coldly. The humans were running out of time. Outside the ship, the Spectre fighters moved into final attack position. Chen locked her torpedoes onto the exact location of the Starbreaker chamber. Her targeting computer confirmed the shot. She spoke quietly into the communication channel. Spectre wing attack run beginning. 5 stealth fighters suddenly accelerated toward the Dominion flagship. Their engines burning bright as they prepared to strike. Dominion sensors finally detected them. Warning alarms filled the alien command ship. Commander, small enemy fighters approaching. Defensive weapons fired immediately. Energy cannons and missile batteries opened fire across the darkness. 2 Spectre fighters were hit and exploded, but the remaining 3 continued forward. Chen held her course despite the storm of enemy fire. "Target locked," she said. Then she pressed the firing control. 3 heavy torpedoes launched toward the flagship, racing directly toward the Starbreaker chamber. Inside the Dominion command bridge, Varkin watched the incoming weapons appear on the display. His eyes widened. "Intercept those torpedoes," he shouted, but it was already too late. The torpedoes struck the side of the flagship. The explosion tore through several layers of armor, and deep inside the ship, the Starbreaker chamber began to overload. Across the battlefield, every sensor detected the sudden surge of unstable energy, and everyone realized the next few seconds would decide the fate of the entire system. The moment the torpedo struck the Dominion flagship, the entire battlefield changed. A massive flash of light burst from the side of the alien command ship as the explosions ripped through several layers of armored hull. Inside the vessel, warning alarms screamed across every deck. Red emergency lights filled the corridors. Crew members were thrown to the floor as the powerful shock wave traveled through the structure of the ship. Deep inside the flagship, the Starbreaker chamber began to shake violently. The containment field surrounding the weapon flickered as unstable energy surged through the damaged systems. Dominion engineers rushed across the chamber, trying to stabilize the reactor core. One of them shouted in panic, "Containment failure beginning. Energy levels rising too fast." Back on the bridge, Commander Varkin held tightly to the command console as the ship trembled beneath his feet. "Report," he demanded. An officer quickly checked the system displays. "Starbreaker chamber heavily damaged," he said. "Containment field dropping to 60%. Varkin's eyes widened. If the containment collapsed, the weapon would explode inside the flagship, destroying their entire fleet instantly. He slammed his clawed hand onto the console. "Stabilize the reactor immediately. We must complete the charge." But the engineers deep inside the ship were already struggling to keep the weapon under control. Cracks had formed across the containment shell. Power conduits were burning out. Every second, the energy inside the Starbreaker continued growing more unstable. Outside the flagship, the human Spectre fighters pulled away from the target as debris and fire burst from the damaged hull. Lieutenant Mara Chen watched the explosion from her cockpit. "Direct hit," she reported. "Starbreaker chamber damaged." Inside the command ship, Aegis, Prime Admiral Hayes listened carefully to the report. "Damage assessment," he asked. The tactical officer studied the sensor readings. "Admiral, the weapon is still active, but the containment field is unstable." Hayes nodded slowly. That meant the weapon could still destroy the planet if the Dominion engineers managed to repair it. But now there was another possibility. The weapon might destroy the Dominion fleet. Instead, Hayes spoke calmly. "All fleets maintain distance from the flagship. If that reactor explodes, we do not want to be near it." Across the battlefield, human ships began slowly pulling back from the center of the Dominion formation. But they did not retreat completely. They maintained a careful circle around the enemy fleet, waiting, watching. Inside the Dominion flagship, the situation was growing worse. One of the engineers shouted over the communication channel, "Commander, containment field now at 40% energy levels still rising. Varkin clenched his claws tightly. He realized the humans had not just attacked the ship, they had struck the most dangerous part of it. Another officer spoke nervously. "Commander, if the containment collapses, the Starbreaker will detonate inside the flagship." Varkin looked at the display showing the human colony world below, millions of life signals still glowing across the planet. His plan had been simple: destroy the colony, cripple humanity, escape the system during the chaos. But now everything was falling apart. He turned toward the engineering officer. "How long until the weapon is stable?" The officer hesitated. "Commander, stabilization may not be possible. The chamber has severe structural damage." Varkin roared with anger. "Then redirect the energy into the main weapon systems. If the reactor explodes, we will release its power against the human fleet." Across the ship, engineers began attempting a dangerous maneuver. They tried to redirect the unstable Starbreaker energy into the main plasma cannons, but the damaged conduits struggled to handle the overwhelming power. Several sections of the flagship suddenly exploded as energy overloads ripped through the systems. Back on Aegis Prime, the human officers watched the growing chaos inside the Dominion vessel. "Admiral, energy levels inside the flagship are becoming unstable." An officer reported possible internal detonation within minutes. Hayes studied the display carefully. The Dominion commander was desperate now. A desperate enemy was always dangerous. He opened a fleet-wide communication channel. "All units, prepare for emergency maneuvering. If that reactor explodes, we move immediately." Several human ships activated their engines, preparing for rapid movement. Meanwhile, the Spectre fighters regrouped at a safe distance from the flagship. Lieutenant Chen watched the damaged enemy ship through her cockpit window. Large pieces of burning debris floated away from the broken hull. But the ship was still alive, still dangerous. Inside the Dominion flagship, Varkin realized the situation was slipping out of his control. Reports of fires and system failures continued arriving from every deck. "Containment field now at 25%, an engineer reported. Varkin stared at the display. The humans had turned his own weapon against him. For the first time since entering human space, he felt something unfamiliar: fear. He turned slowly toward the communications officer. "Open channel to the human fleet." The officer looked surprised but obeyed. Across the battlefield, a signal suddenly appeared on every human command screen. Admiral Hayes watched as the image of the Dominion commander appeared. Varkin's expression was filled with cold anger. "Human commander," he said, "call off your attack and allow us to leave this system, or the Starbreaker will detonate." Hayes looked calmly at the alien leader. "You entered our territory," he replied. "You destroyed our stations and threatened our people. Now you demand escape." Varkin's eyes burned with fury. "If we fall, this entire system will fall with us." Hayes paused for a moment. The officers around him waited silently. Then he spoke quietly. "You misunderstand something, Commander. Humanity is prepared for sacrifice, but we will not allow you to destroy innocent lives." Varkin laughed bitterly. "Then watch closely, human, because the end of this system begins now." Inside the Dominion flagship, the containment field dropped to 10%. Energy surged wildly through the damaged reactor core. Across the battlefield, every sensor detected the same terrifying signal. The Starbreaker weapon was seconds away from exploding, and the fate of the entire colony world now depended on what humanity would do next. Across the battlefield, every sensor suddenly flashed with the same warning signal: critical energy spike detected. The Starbreaker inside the Dominion flagship had reached a level no reactor should ever reach. The unstable weapon core was now seconds away from catastrophic detonation. If it exploded at this distance, the shock wave could destroy the human colony below and cripple every fleet in orbit. Inside the command ship Aegis Prime, the bridge became completely silent. Admiral Hayes watched the glowing energy readings rising rapidly on the holographic display. The Dominion commander had pushed the reactor beyond control. One of the officers spoke urgently. "Admiral, containment field now at 5%. Estimated detonation time under 2 minutes." Another officer added, "If the reactor explodes here, the planetary atmosphere will ignite casualty estimates in the millions." Hayes slowly took a deep breath. Every human commander in the system was now watching him. The decision he made in the next few seconds would decide the fate of the entire colony. He spoke calmly. "Distance from colony world." The navigation officer quickly checked the numbers. "Enemy flagship currently positioned 300,000 kilometers above the colony." Hayes nodded slowly. That distance was not enough. If the weapon exploded there, the shockwave would still devastate the planet. Another officer spoke quickly. Admiral, we can attempt a concentrated fleet strike. Destroy the flagship before detonation. The tactical officer immediately shook his head. Negative. The reactor is already unstable. If we destroy the ship, it will explode instantly. Hayes looked again at the growing energy reading. The Dominion commander had created a situation where normal tactics could not save them, but humans had never relied only on normal tactics. He turned toward the engineering officer. Status of the Atlas platform. The officer quickly checked another display. Atlas platform fully operational. Hayes nodded. Prepare it for immediate deployment. Several officers on the bridge looked surprised. The Atlas platform was a classified system that few people in the fleet had ever seen in action. The tactical officer spoke quietly. Admiral, the Atlas platform has never been tested in real combat. Hayes gave a small, calm smile. Then today will be its first test. He opened a fleet-wide communication channel. All fleets moved to defensive distance immediately. Clear the central battle zone across the battlefield. Human ships quickly began pulling away from the Dominion formation. Battleships activated their engines. Carriers launched additional fighters to escort the retreat. Cruisers repositioned themselves between the colony world and the unstable flagship inside the Dominion command ship. Varkon watched the movement with confusion. The humans were retreating. Perhaps they had finally accepted defeat. One officer spoke nervously. Commander, energy levels still rising. Containment failure imminent. Varkon watched the human ships moving away. Good, he said. They know they cannot stop it. But he did not understand the real reason for the human movement. Far away behind the main human fleet, a massive shape slowly appeared from behind a large asteroid cluster. At first it looked like a small artificial moon. Then its engines activated. The enormous structure began moving toward the center of the battlefield. This was the Atlas platform, a gigantic armored structure designed for one purpose: containment of catastrophic energy events. Inside Aegis Prime, Admiral Hayes watched the platform moving forward. Distance to target? He asked. Navigation officer responded quickly. Atlas platform approaching optimal interception range. 2 minutes until contact. The entire bridge watched the massive structure slowly approaching the unstable Dominion flagship. Meanwhile, inside the alien command ship, Varkon suddenly noticed the enormous object appearing on his sensors. What is that? He demanded. One officer quickly scanned the signal. Unknown structure. Massive energy shielding detected. Varkon stared at the display. The structure was moving directly toward his ship. Impossible, he whispered. The Starbreaker energy had now reached critical levels across the battlefield. Human sensors detected the same terrifying signal. Detonation countdown beginning 60 seconds. Inside the Atlas platform, dozens of human engineers worked quickly at their stations. Power generators roared to life. Massive containment fields began forming around the platform. The structure was designed to absorb enormous energy bursts. But even its creators were not completely sure it could contain a Starbreaker explosion. Back on the Aegis Prime, the tactical officer spoke quietly. Admiral, Atlas platform in final position. Hayes nodded. Activate containment grid. Across the massive structure, huge emitters began glowing with bright blue light. A wide containment field expanded outward, forming a giant sphere around the Dominion flagship. Inside the alien ship, Varkon watched the glowing barrier forming around them. His eyes widened. They are trying to contain the explosion, he said. One of his officers whispered, Commander, if they succeed, we will be trapped inside the blast. Varkon suddenly understood. The humans were not trying to save their fleet. They were trying to protect the colony world, even if it meant sacrificing everything inside that containment field. The countdown continued. 30 seconds. Energy readings across the battlefield climbed to impossible levels. The Starbreaker core began breaking apart under the pressure. Inside the Atlas platform, engineers struggled to keep the containment field stable. Power levels increasing. One engineer reported field integrity 80%. Admiral Hayes watched the numbers carefully. This was the moment. 20 seconds. The Dominion flagship suddenly erupted with uncontrolled energy bursts. Huge cracks appeared across its hull. Bright streams of energy shot into space. 10 seconds. Every human ship moved to maximum safe distance. The containment sphere around the flagship glowed brighter and brighter. 5 seconds. Inside the Dominion command bridge, Varkon stood silently as the final alarm sounded. For the first time, he understood the truth. Human silence had never meant weakness. It meant patience, preparation, and the willingness to sacrifice everything to protect their people. Then the Starbreaker reactor exploded. A massive wave of blinding energy burst outward from the Dominion flagship, and the fate of the entire system now depended on whether the human containment platform could hold the blast. The Starbreaker reactor exploded with a light so bright that every sensor across the system went blind for a moment. A massive sphere of burning energy burst outward from the Dominion flagship like a newborn star. Inside the containment field created by the Atlas platform, the explosion slammed against the glowing barrier with unimaginable force. For a moment, it looked like the entire structure would be destroyed instantly. Inside the Atlas platform, every alarm in the control chamber screamed at once. Power surge detected. Containment field integrity dropping. Engineers struggled to hold their positions as the platform shook violently. The entire structure trembled under the pressure of the Starbreaker blast. One engineer shouted over the noise. Energy spiked beyond predicted levels. Field integrity, 60%. Another officer yelled. Containment wall destabilizing on the northern emitters. Back on the command ship, Aegis Prime Admiral Hayes watched the explosion through the holographic battlefield display. The energy sphere inside the containment field had expanded into a giant storm of plasma and radiation. The Atlas platform floated directly at the center of the chaos like a shield standing against a supernova. Tactical officer spoke urgently. Admiral containment field dropping to 50%. Hayes remained calm, but his eyes stayed fixed on the display. If the containment grid failed even for a second, the blast wave would escape and strike the colony world below. Millions of lives depended on that barrier holding inside the Atlas platform. The situation was becoming desperate. Power generators were running at maximum output. Cooling systems were beginning to fail. Engineers rushed from one control station to another trying to stabilize the containment emitters. One of the young technicians looked at the readings in disbelief. Energy output far beyond design limits, he said. The chief engineer gripped the control panel tightly, then pushed the system harder. He ordered, "If the barrier falls, the colony dies." Across the battlefield, human ships watched the glowing containment sphere from a safe distance. Even from far away, the explosion looked terrifying. The burning light inside the barrier twisted like a raging storm trapped inside a glass prison. Fragments of the destroyed Dominion flagship drifted inside the sphere, vaporizing instantly as they touched the plasma waves. Lieutenant Mara Chen watched the scene from her Spectre fighter cockpit. Her voice sounded quiet over the communication channel. "I have never seen energy levels like this before." Another pilot answered, "If that field breaks, we will all see them." Back inside the Atlas platform, the containment field suddenly flickered as another massive surge of energy struck it. Several emitters exploded, sending sparks across the engineering chamber. One of the engineers fell to the floor as the shockwave passed through the platform. "Containment integrity, 40%, someone shouted. The chief engineer quickly activated several backup power systems. Emergency reactors began feeding additional energy into the containment grid. The glowing sphere around the explosion brightened again as the field struggled to hold on Aegis Prime. Admiral Hayes looked toward the engineering officer. "How long until the Starbreaker energy collapses?" The officer studied the sensor data carefully. "Hard to estimate, sir, but the reactor core should burn itself out within 3 minutes. Hayes nodded slowly. 3 minutes. That was an eternity in a situation like this. Another officer spoke nervously. "Atlas platform structural damage increasing. If they exceed 90% power output, the generators may explode." Hayes looked at the display again. He knew the engineers inside the Atlas platform understood the risk. They were holding the containment field, even though it could destroy their own ship, because they also knew what would happen if they failed. Inside the containment sphere, the Starbreaker explosion continued raging. Massive waves of plasma slammed against the glowing barrier again and again. Each impact sent powerful vibrations through the Atlas platform. Inside the engineering chamber, one of the technicians suddenly shouted, "Energy spike approaching brace." Another violent shockwave slammed into the containment field. Several more emitters failed under the pressure. "Containment integrity 30%. The chief engineer wiped sweat from his face. "Redirect power from life support systems," he ordered. Another technician hesitated. "That will shut down half the oxygen circulation." The engineer looked directly at him. "We only need oxygen for a few more minutes." "Do it." The technician nodded and activated the command. Power levels surged again as more energy flowed into the containment grid. Outside the platform, the glowing sphere stabilized slightly. On the Aegis Prime, the tactical officer watched the readings change. "Containment field stabilizing temporarily," he reported. Hayes allowed himself a small breath of relief, but the danger was still far from over. The energy storm inside the sphere continued raging. Back inside the Atlas platform, the engineers watched the reactor readings carefully. Energy levels finally beginning to drop, one technician said. The chief engineer leaned closer to the display. The Starbreaker core was slowly burning itself out, but it still had enough power to destroy the entire system if the containment field failed. Now another powerful shock wave slammed into the barrier. Containment integrity 25%. The structure of the Atlas platform groaned loudly as the metal hull struggled to endure the stress. Several officers on the Aegis Prime looked worried. Admiral, if the containment falls below 20%, we may lose the platform. Hayes nodded quietly, but he said nothing because the decision had already been made. The Atlas platform would hold, or it would die trying. Seconds passed slowly as the energy storm continued burning inside the containment sphere. Finally, the sensor readings began changing. The bright plasma storm started shrinking, energy levels dropping rapidly. Inside the Atlas platform, one of the engineers suddenly shouted with excitement. Reactor collapse beginning. The Starbreaker core was finally exhausting itself. On the command ship, Hayes watched the glowing sphere slowly dim. Containment integrity 20%, the tactical officer reported. But the energy wave is fading across the battlefield. Human ships continued waiting silently. Then suddenly the bright storm inside the containment field collapsed inward. The raging plasma faded. The burning light dimmed. The Starbreaker explosion had finally ended. The containment sphere flickered weakly before slowly fading away. Inside the center of the battlefield, nothing remained except drifting fragments of the destroyed Dominion flagship and the heavily damaged Atlas platform still floating silently where it had held the fire of a dying star. For several long moments, the battlefield remained silent. The violent storm of energy that had once filled the center of the system was gone. Only scattered debris and fading radiation clouds remained where the Dominion flagship had been. The Atlas platform floated slowly in the middle of the empty space, its massive hull scarred and damaged but still intact. Across the system, human ships watched carefully, waiting to confirm that the danger had truly passed. Inside the command ship Aegis Prime, Admiral Hayes stood quietly as the tactical officers studied the sensor readings. Radiation levels dropping. One officer reported Starbreaker energy fully dissipated. Another officer spoke moments later. Dominion flagship completely destroyed. No life signals detected. A calm silence spread across the bridge. The greatest threat to the colony had been eliminated, but the battle was not yet finished. The Dominion fleet still had dozens of ships remaining across the system. Many had been damaged during the earlier fighting, but they were still dangerous. Hayes looked at the holographic battlefield map. Without their flagship, the alien fleet had lost its central command. Ships were scattered across space, some drifting, some attempting to regroup. Confusion had spread through their ranks. Perfect, he said quietly. He turned toward the communications officer. Send signal to all fleets. Begin Phase 3. Across the system, human ships received the order immediately. Battleships adjusted their formations. Cruisers moved into interception positions. Carrier vessels launched new waves of fighters. The human fleet that had been holding distance now began moving forward again. Inside several Dominion warships, panic had already begun spreading. Without the flagship, their communication network had collapsed. Officers struggled to organize defensive formations. Some commanders wanted to continue fighting. Others wanted to retreat from the system before more human ships arrived. Inside a heavily damaged Dominion cruiser, the acting commander stared at the tactical display. The human fleet was advancing from multiple directions. How many ships remain operational, he asked. One officer quickly checked the damage reports. Approximately 30 warships still combat capable. The commander looked at the screen showing hundreds of human vessels approaching 30. Against that, he muttered. He already knew the answer. This battle could not be won. Another officer spoke nervously. Commander, we are receiving surrender signals from several ships. The alien commander clenched his claws in frustration. Dominion fleets had never surrendered before. Their empire ruled through strength and fear. But now that fear was turning against them. Back on Aegis Prime, Admiral Hayes watched the alien movements carefully. Dominion ships are attempting to regroup near the outer debris field, one officer reported. Hayes nodded. They are trying to escape the system. He looked toward the navigation officer, blocked their retreat routes. Within seconds, several groups of human ships accelerated toward the outer edges of the battlefield. Battleships positioned themselves along the possible escape corridors. Cruisers deployed long-range missile batteries. Carrier fighters spread across the surrounding space like a wide net. The Dominion fleet was now trapped once again. Lieutenant Mara Chen flew her Spectre fighter near the advancing human formation. She watched the alien ships through the cockpit display. Several of them were badly damaged with broken hulls and failing engines. Some were already powering down their weapons. "Looks like they finally understand," Chen said over the radio. Another pilot answered. "Too late for that." Inside the Dominion cruiser, the acting commander received a new transmission. "Human fleet communication signal," he reported. The alien commander hesitated before opening the message. The image of Admiral Hayes appeared on the display. "Dominion vessels." Hayes said calmly, "Your flagship has been destroyed. Your fleet is surrounded. Power down your weapons and surrender. You will be treated according to interstellar law." For several seconds, the alien officers said nothing. The commander looked around the bridge. He could see the fear in the eyes of his crew. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy for generations, but this battle had shown them something terrifying. There were species stronger than them. Finally, he spoke quietly. "Open broadcast channel across the battlefield." The signal spread to every remaining Dominion ship. "This is Commander Terral of the Dominion cruiser Vortex. Our flagship has fallen. Our fleet cannot continue this battle. All Dominion ships power down weapons. Immediately, prepare to surrender." The order spread quickly through the remaining alien vessels. One by one, the Dominion ships shut down their weapons. Missile systems closed. Plasma cannons powered down engines, slowed to minimal thrust. The war was over. Back on the Aegis Prime, the tactical officer confirmed the signals. "Admiral, all remaining Dominion ships surrendering." Hayes nodded slowly. "Send recovery teams, secure their vessels, and assist any survivors." The human fleet began carefully approaching the disabled alien ships. Boarding teams prepared to enter the surrendered vessels. Medical ships moved forward to help wounded crews. Meanwhile, the damaged Atlas platform continued drifting near the center of the battlefield. Several engineering ships approached it slowly. Lieutenant Chen watched the scene while guiding her fighter back toward the carrier. "Hard to believe that platform held a Starbreaker explosion," she said. Another pilot answered. "Human engineers build things to survive the impossible." Far below the battle, the human colony world rotated peacefully. The people on the planet had watched the battle through emergency broadcasts. They had seen the explosion of the Starbreaker and the glowing containment field protecting them. Now they watched as the Dominion fleet surrendered. Across the planet, millions of people cheered. Humanity had defended them, and the most feared empire in the galaxy had been defeated. But Admiral Hayes knew this victory meant something much larger than a single battle. The Dominion Empire had just learned a lesson. The entire galaxy would soon understand human silence was not weakness. It was restraint. And when that restraint ended, war followed, and humanity did not lose wars. The battlefield slowly grew quiet. The explosions had ended. The weapons had powered down, and the glowing trails of missiles and plasma had faded into darkness. Only drifting wreckage remained as a reminder of the battle that had just taken place. Large pieces of broken Dominion ships floated silently through space. Human engineering vessels moved carefully between them, collecting survivors and securing damaged ships. The great battle above the colony world had finally ended. Inside the command ship, Aegis Prime Admiral Hayes stood near the wide observation window looking out at the calm stars. Moments earlier, that same space had been filled with fire, destruction, and death. Now, it looked peaceful again. Behind him, several officers continued working at their stations. "Admiral," one officer reported, "all Dominion ships secured, 31 vessels captured, several others destroyed during the battle." Another officer added, "Survivors from the Dominion fleet are being transferred to containment transports. Medical teams are assisting injured prisoners." Hayes nodded slowly. "Treat them properly," he said. "They are prisoners, not enemies anymore." The officers acknowledged the order. Human military doctrine had always been clear. War might be brutal, but humanity would never abandon its principles. Outside the command ship, dozens of human vessels surrounded the captured Dominion fleet. Boarding teams entered alien ships, securing weapon systems and guiding their crews into holding areas. Some Dominion soldiers looked shocked, others looked ashamed. They had expected humanity to be weak. Instead, they had witnessed something far more powerful: discipline, preparation, and unity. Far away near the center of the battlefield, the Atlas platform still floated silently. Its once smooth armor was now covered in deep burn marks and damaged plating. Several of its containment emitters had been destroyed during the explosion, yet the massive structure had survived. Engineering ships slowly moved closer to inspect the damage. Inside, the platform chief engineer Malik sat heavily in his chair watching the system reports. The containment field generators were nearly burned out. Half the internal power systems had failed, but the platform was still alive. One of the engineers looked at him with a tired smile. "We actually survived that," he said. Malik gave a quiet laugh. "Remind me never to volunteer for that assignment again." Back on the colony world, millions of citizens watched the final moments of the battle through emergency broadcasts. When the Dominion fleet powered down, its weapon celebrations began across the planet. Cities lit their towers with bright lights. Ships in orbit sounded their signal horns. People gathered in streets and plazas cheering as the human fleet moved across the sky. For many colonists, this had been the first time they had ever seen the full strength of humanity. They had heard stories of hidden fleets and powerful defenses, but seeing it with their own eyes was something different. It was proof that humanity would always protect its people. Inside the Dominion cruiser Vortex, the defeated Commander Tyrrell sat quietly inside a secured chamber. Human guards stood nearby, but they treated him with calm professionalism. Through the window, he could see human ships surrounding the captured fleet. A human officer entered the chamber. "Commander Tyrrell," the officer said, "you will be transferred to a detention vessel shortly." Tyrrell nodded slowly. "Your fleet fought with great discipline," he said quietly. The human officer did not answer immediately. Finally, he spoke. "Humanity prefers peace, but when someone threatens our people, we respond." Tyrrell lowered his head slightly. "Our empire believed your silence meant weakness." The officer looked at him calmly. "Many species believe that. That is why they make the same mistake." Meanwhile, inside the human command center, beneath the surface of Earth, the leaders of the fleet watched the final battle reports. Admiral Reyes stood beside a large holographic map of the system. "Dominion fleet defeated," she said. "Colony secured. Atlas platform damaged but operational." Several officers nodded with relief. The threat had been eliminated, but everyone in the room understood something important. The Dominion Empire was not small. This battle had destroyed one fleet, but others still existed. Reyes looked at the map again. "Send diplomatic messages to nearby civilizations," she ordered. "Inform them that the Dominion invasion has been stopped and that human territory remains protected." Another officer asked, "Should we prepare for further Dominion retaliation?" Reyes thought for a moment. Then she answered calmly, "Yes, because after today the entire galaxy knows something new about humanity." Far away above the colony world, the human fleet slowly began reorganizing. Some ships escorted the captured Dominion vessels away from the battlefield. Others moved into protective orbits around the planet. Fighter wings returned to their carriers. Repair crews started working on damaged ships. Admiral Hayes watched the fleets moving across the stars. He knew that historians would talk about this battle for generations, not because of the destruction, but because of the lesson it had taught. The galaxy often misunderstood quiet civilizations. Many believed strength only came from loud threats and constant warfare. Humanity had shown a different path. For years, humans had remained silent. They had avoided unnecessary wars. They had watched, studied, and prepared. Many species believed that silence meant fear. But now the truth was clear. Human silence was never weakness. It was restraint. And when that restraint finally ended, humanity responded with overwhelming force. Across the galaxy, news of the battle began spreading from one star system to another. Stories of the Dominion fleet entering human territory. Stories of the hidden human armada. Stories of the Starbreaker explosion contained by an impossible machine. And one message repeated across every transmission. The Dominion had mistaken silence for weakness, and Earth had answered with total war. From that day forward, every civilization in the galaxy remembered one simple rule. Humans may appear quiet, humans may appear patient, but no one should ever mistake their silence for weakness. Because when humanity finally speaks, the entire galaxy listens.